Do you want to hear something crazy? We spend nearly a third of our adult lives working. That's a staggering amount of time. And yet, so many of us go through the motions, doing the work that doesn't quite feel aligned, meaningful, or energizing. For years, I believed that if you just worked hard enough, achieved enough, and earned enough, then I'd feel fulfilled. But what I've come to realize through coaching, research, and personal reflection is this. A meaningful life isn't something we find at the end of a long road. Rather, it's something we build moment by moment, especially through our work. In the field of positive psychology, meaning is one of the core pillars of well-being. And in financial psychology, we see when people connect their work and money in meaningful ways aligned with their values, they experience greater enduring satisfaction, not just in their careers, but in their whole lives. Welcome back to the YouPotential podcast. I'm your host, Shaun Maslyk. If you're here listening, please take a moment to subscribe to the show. It helps us bring you more conversations that support a fulfilling and meaningful life. Today's episode is for executive leaders and everyday workers alike, because no matter your title or industry, we're all trying to find more meaning in our work. That's why I was so excited to sit down with Tamara Myles. She is a speaker, author, and professor who helps people reclaim meaning at work by focusing on what really matters, what she calls her 3 C's: contribution, challenge, and community. In this episode, we explore what it really means to experience deep, lasting meaning in your work. Not just feeling happier or more satisfied, but doing work that aligns with who you are, what you value, and the impact you want to leave behind. We also talk about how money can either support or silently distract us from that deeper meaning, and how each of us, regardless of our role or title, can begin to shape work that feels not only fulfilling, but deeply meaningful, which helps us live better lives. If you've ever asked yourself, is this all there is? This episode is for you. I hope you enjoy this fascinating conversation with Tamara Myles. Tamara Myles, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so delighted to be here.
I am happy to have you on the show. I always find it enjoyable preparing for my conversations, reading books, listening to my guest episodes they previously spoke on podcasts, and then seeing them, I guess not in person, but on video. So I feel like this is going to be a great conversation.
I'm really excited.
I thought we would start off by talking about Madonna. Not Madonna that we might think about with the iconic musical hits that sing in all of our minds, but rather a mentor of yours. And the reason why I thought we'd start with Madonna, your perhaps mentor, is, at least for myself, when I think of meaning, especially in the workplace, I have a few mentors that really helped me find not my meaning per se, but find an avenue to realize that I can find my own meaning because they seem to have so much meaning in their own workplace or their own careers. So let's start with Madonna. Who is she and what kind of influence did she have on you?
So Madonna Badger was the founder and chief creative of the second advertising agency I ever worked at. So it was like I was very early career. It was my second job out of college. It was in New York City. I was kind of fulfilling this dream that I always had growing up in Brazil of living in New York and working in advertising. And she was somebody who really believed in me and gave me these opportunities to stretch and try something when I was terrified. But she believed in me. She kind of pushed me. She gave me opportunities. And that belief really stayed with me, really made me trust myself and trust my instincts. And, I didn't have language for this at the time, but it made my work really meaningful. And after I left New York and moved to North Carolina, I switched jobs. And, when I worked in total for 3 different advertising agencies in my career before I pivoted. And, I was kind of doing the same job. Advertising, I was in client relationship management and strategic development. And so it was kind of the same job. But the experience of work in those 3 jobs was so different. And working under Madonna was so meaningful. And that really stayed with me that, meaningful work isn't as much about what you do. It's much more about how you experience what you do.
So many different avenues we can go from there. First of all, so you're born in Brazil?
Yes.
You moved. Okay. What was that like, having this dream to go to this iconic city, New York? I mean, it doesn't matter where you live, about New York City, and an ad agency, another iconic in a way role in New York. What was that like to land in New York City as this young, aspiring individual trying to make it in New York City at an ad agency?
Yeah, it was an amazing experience. So I grew up in Brazil. I went to an American school, so I was bilingual growing up. And when I was 14 years old, I was reading a magazine, and it was something about like a Brazilian artist that was performing in New York, and, kind of pictures of New York City. And I was just really enamored with that idea. I grew up in a big city in Brazil, but I was like, oh, I want to live there someday. And I ended up, doing most of college in Brazil, but then transferring to the Midwest and finishing college in the US. And that was where I had my first job in St. Louis, my first ad agency. And then I was like, I'm only here for a limited time. I had a work visa, so I only could stay for 7 years after graduating. And I was like, I'm going to do it. Like, I'm going to go for it and apply for jobs in New York, try to pursue my dream. And the first time I flew into New York from St. Louis, I remember as we were landing in LaGuardia and I could see the city, I just started crying. Like, it was just such a powerful moment that I was like, wow, like, I'm doing this, like, and it was almost 10 years after I had read that article in the magazine.
Oh, wow. Very interesting. That flight in, I think it doesn't matter who you are when you've seen New York on movies, magazines, it really hits home when you see it.
Yeah. And now my son, who's my second child, is off to NYU in the fall for college. So it's like full circle.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you mentioned meaning is not what you do, it's what you experience. As you said that, I really felt it. And the reason why I was keen to ask you this question about Madonna is I distinctively remember someone named Eileen Laverick, who hired me, who really saw something in me that I never saw myself until she did. And right now, it's just reminding me of a professor that I had in my MAP program. I know you took a similar course. It was during one of our coaching courses, and she said, when you see someone, it gives them permission to see themselves. And your conversation around the mentor just brought that up and relived my own experience. So I just want to say thank you for that. And I think it's just so important as leaders to really be able to see our people just like Madonna did to you.
I agree. And that was a theme that came up again and again and again in our study, especially in the qualitative study when we were really digging for stories. We heard so many powerful stories of leaders, mentors, coaches, parents, those people who really believe in you, who see the best in you, and kind of open your eyes to see those parts of yourself too. And that is so deeply meaningful. That stays with people. I mean, I was in New York working with Madonna starting in 2002. It was over 20 years ago. But I remember so clearly those moments when she was like, Tamara, you're ready for this. Go, like, you can do this. I believe in you. That really stays with you. And one of my MAP professors It was the same. Judy Salzberg, she, right after I graduated, she invited me to be an assistant instructor on the course. She invited me to be on the Penn Resilience Program team. And that, again, I was like, wait, there were like 48 very qualified students in my class. Like, I had imposter syndrome the whole time. Like, what? You chose me? Like, really? Like, what do you see in me? And it's these moments when people are like, no, you come. I would love to have you. Like, you bring strengths. You have a way of seeing things. And those moments when you see yourself reflected through somebody else's eyes, and they see your strengths, they see your potential, they see the best in you, right? Those moments are really powerful.
Yeah. So for leaders listening, I will get right into the meat of the book here, but in regards to this conversation that we're having about noticing your employees, what is your research? What has your preparation for the book taught you about the importance of noticing your employees in terms of that, whether it's contribution, being connected? What would you have to say to leaders?
So I'm going to back up just a little bit before I answer the question, just to kind of situate people into like what I mean when I talk about meaningful work, and where this noticing of people kind of fits into what we found in our research. So when I talk about meaningful work, and I talked about, it's not about the work we do, it's how we experience the work we do, right? Meaningful work often gets confused with purpose, or even used interchangeably, meaning and purpose. And they are different things. Having a purpose, a grand mission, those are great things to bring people in the door, right? To get the right talent, people who believe the same things you believe in, who want to solve the same problems you want to solve. So it's obviously very important. But once we get the job, and once we're there every day, having this grand purpose is not enough to help us experience meaning at work. And what we find is that there are three components of the experience of meaning at work, what we call the 3 C's of meaningful work. And they are community, contribution, and challenge. So community is really about feeling like you belong, that you have positive relationships with the people you work with, and that you can show up authentically and share what you really think, share your real ideas and perspectives, right? Community says, I matter here. Contribution is about understanding the impact of what you do every day. What are you contributing to, and how is it that what you do contributes to something bigger than yourself? So contribution says, what I do matters here. So community, I matter here. Contribution, what I do matters here. And challenge is kind of what we've been talking about, is about seeing potential in people, seeing people's strengths, and really helping them reach their full potential. Challenge says, my growth and development and learning matters here. So it's really the combination of those 3 C's. There is a really powerful multiplier effect when all three are present. We really feel a sense of meaning at work. But even if just one of them is missing, it can bring the other two crashing down, because in a multiplier effect, if one is at 0, it kind of cancels out the other two. So they don't all have to be present at the same level, but you have to have a little bit of all three of them for you to be able to experience meaning at work. And so to answer your question about noticing people, that is important across all three. For community, in our research, the most powerful question we asked that predicted a sense of community was, my leader cares about what's happening in my life outside of work, right? So do you know anything about the people you work with beyond what they do, or what email they sent you, or what time you're seeing them in a meeting? Do you know their spouse's name, or if they spent the weekend at a soccer tournament, or if they like to hike, or if they're scuba diving certified? Those things really matter to people. And of course, there's research from Gallup saying that people who have a best friend at work are much more likely to stay, to be fulfilled at work, and to experience meaning at work. So community, and the noticing in community comes to noticing people beyond just the tasks they do, right? Contribution, noticing comes in there because a big part of feeling a sense of contribution is positive feedback. It's, having a leader or colleague or coworker, somebody come to you and say, hey, I noticed that you went above and beyond with the research for that presentation, and you brought in that really creative paper to support the claim. And thanks so much for doing that. That was very helpful. And because of you, we landed the client. Something like that, right? But like noticing people's contributions and then thanking them and highlighting them and acknowledging them is really powerful. And then with challenge, I think the noticing comes to down to what we were talking about, noticing people's strengths, noticing their potential, giving them opportunities to develop those strengths and making it safe. Just before our recording here, Shaun, I was doing a presentation to a group of senior leaders that are all women. And one of the questions I asked the group was, think of somebody who had a really positive influence in your life, somebody who had a positive influence in your life. And think about them and what qualities did they bring to the relationship? What is it about them, and what did they do? And the stories we heard were similar to my Madonna story, to the story of your professor. It's people who noticed them, who encouraged them, who saw something in them before they saw it in themselves, and had their back no matter what, made it really safe for them to take those risks. And so I think noticing is so important and cuts across all 3 C's.
I mean, the human experience is to be seen, heard, and valued. And that's what I'm really hearing you speak to, is this noticing. And I think back to 10, 15 years, while I'm sure there's some business leaders writing about noticing and the importance of valuing and seeing your employees, I don't think it was the mainstream narrative. Often we thought leaders was like productivity. How do we maximize the output? But I appreciate how your work is really, I don't know if it's challenging, really starting conversations with leaders and alike around this importance of integrating these 3 C's.
But I'll say, Shaun, I think the moment we're in now, I think right when COVID hit, right? If we're thinking like we're in the post-COVID world, and when COVID hit, there was a huge interest, like a very big interest in the human side of work, right? The soft skills, resilience training, and DEI, like all those initiatives, belonging, were so big. And I think the pendulum has swung a little bit. And you're like, okay, the power, you could say the power was in the hands of employees, right? Because people were really questioning, like, is this what I want to do with my life? Does what I do even matter? People were quiet quitting, or it's when the Great Resignation happened, right? And so companies were really trying to retain people to make their work experience better. And then the pendulum swung a little bit too far the other way, where now you could say the power is back in the hand of employers, and maybe there is a big resurgence, of interest in productivity and, how to get people to perform at their best and all of that. And that, my first book was about productivity. It's called The Secret to Peak Productivity. It was published in 2014. So I have experience in both. And what I've learned through my own experience over the past 2 decades, but also through the research, is that they're not mutually exclusive. Those 2 things create a virtuous cycle, because when we are productive, when we have systems in place that allow us to be productive, we have more space to do things that matter most, right? To focus on meaningful work. But when we are experiencing work as meaningful, we are much more productive. And there's research now from Oxford University and MIT that shows a causal effect between the experience of work, like a positive experience of work, and a 13% increase on average in productivity per worker. So when leaders and organizations think like, oh, this is the soft side, like we don't have time to deal with now, what we know is that meaningful work is actually a huge driver. It's the leading indicator of these outcomes like engagement, productivity, satisfaction with work, even financial outcomes and financial performance of the organization, stock prices and all that.
Well, in your book, you talk about Adam Grant's research where he talked about above 100% increase in productivity on people that was shown the impact of the work, or I assume had some sense of meaning. And yeah, what struck me as very interesting is your idea of like when these values are aligned, when employees have meaning in their work, and the employers and the leaders have allowed them to find this meaning, it's not just at the benefit of the employees, but productivity actually increases. And I bring this up because I've heard people say like, especially like you're talking about this pendulum. I definitely hear people like, back to work, like stop with the ping pong tables and all this stuff, which I like how you talk about isn't meaning in and itself there.
Right.
But this pendulum is swinging back. But I really like this book, and your idea is that like, whoa. If productivity is a desired outcome, meaning your employees finding meaning is a critical part of increasing that productivity.
Exactly. Because, if you think about, okay, what tools do leaders have to increase productivity, right? And it's the people, right? It's, obviously now AI, and AI is changing the conversation and the future of work and what we're designing for. But, there's this whole world of performative productivity where if it's butts on seats, people are there, but they're not actually engaged. They're not actually working on what you think they're working on. And when you make the experience of work meaningful, we are so much more motivated. It unlocks that motivation, that engagement that then leads to the productivity outcomes we want.
And you use the word performative. On the other end, I feel like there are at times performative ways that organizations are trying to infuse meaning into their work. And so they might have really strong values on the wall. And, when it's on the wall, of course, it means it's implemented, right?
Right.
Can you speak to the importance of alignment between the words we're speaking as leaders and our actions?
Yeah, that is that was like a surprise, not surprising, but the effect was really surprising finding of our research. Kind of, saying one thing, but doing another. So like not role modeling the values that you espouse is the biggest killer of meaning in an organization. And it's actually really hard to recover from for leaders. In our research, a huge part of, what creates this experience of meaningful work is leaders role modeling the espoused behaviors, right? And so, Shaun, if you say, okay, in our organization, we care about honesty, we put our people first and we are customer centric. Right. And you say those things, and those are the things that matter. And you have those on your website and you have those on the wall and all of that. But then let's say there's a big project, right? And the deadline is short. And now you have competing values because you have putting our people first, but you also have that you're customer centric. But in this situation, you kind of have to pick between being customer centric and putting people first, because it means that people are going to have to work late, maybe even work over the weekend to deliver this project on time. And what we found is that the best organizations and the best leaders kind of address it head on and say, hey, you know what? Right now we need all hands on deck. That means that we're prioritizing being customer centric for this situation instead of putting people first. But as soon as we get through this, everybody, we can take a day off, or we'll alternate breaks, or I really need you to be helpful here, but I understand if you can't. And so they just kind of address it head on and are fully transparent and explain the reasons why they're not walking the talk when that's the case. And that still, people really respect that as long as there's transparency and it's addressed head on. The worst is when it's like, well, we value integrity here. And then people see you not acting with integrity, like the Coldplay gate, the CEO. I don't know. I'm sure you saw
Yeah.
it's all
Yeah.
over the internet, right?
It's amazing what travels like so fast that
Exactly.
everyone in the world knows about.
Right. And like that company probably values respect and, integrity and all that stuff. And how can people trust him again? Right.
Family life too, their core value.
Right. Exactly.
Um, yeah, they've got some navigating to do with that.
Yeah.
You talk about a example in the book with Marriott in around this congruency in our values and what we're saying and how we're acting that really spoke to me. I mean, I know of the company. I didn't know Marriott as much as details. You share quite a bit in the book about them. And I bring this up because you're talking about making these tough decisions. Like just because our value is like we value our employees doesn't mean you have to value them over like the existence of your organization. And you share a story with Marriott, and I pulled out a piece that really spoke to me is how they talk about take care of associates and they'll take care of our customers. But what I'm specifically talking about is they had to make a tough choice in COVID, letting go, I think it was 80% of their employees. Can you just speak to why you decided to put this story in the book?
Yeah, because I think that, first of all, we were so lucky to be able to interview Debbie Marriott, who, kind of told us the story of her family and how they started the company, and like from a little hamburger stand to a global chain of hotels with 700,000 employees. Like, it's phenomenal. And before we ever started this research and got the chance to interview her, I'm a huge Marriott fan. Like, I only stay in Marriotts, and then you get the points, and then, you want to stay in more Marriotts. And so my family and I love Marriott hotels anyways, but then understanding how intentional they are about taking care of their employees, because their employees then take care of the people. I mean, I've experienced that firsthand as a customer. When I was going to MAP, I live outside of Boston, and MAP was in Pennsylvania, right? So we would go every month for these like immersive long weekends. And I always stayed at the Marriott there, the Sheraton on campus. And I would show up for breakfast and hug the two women who worked there. I was like, oh, so good to see you again. And they're like, how are you? How was your month? They'll show me a picture of your kids, and these are people that I would see once a month for a long weekend. And they were so, I mean, I still go back, as a instructor now and for the summit, and they're still there. And I go, once a couple times a year, and they still hug me. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so happy you're here after COVID. I went years without seeing them. And that is not normal in most hotels where you stay at, right? And so you can see that they really derive meaning from working there. They're taken care of, and they want to make your experience the best. They remember you. They remember my kids. They know where they're in college, right? How many people can say that from a Sheraton or, equivalent that's not a Marriott property? And so Debbie told us the things they do to take care of their associates. And obviously navigating COVID was a very difficult time for the hospitality industry in general, right? We were stuck at home. Nobody was traveling. And they really leaned into their values, which, like you said, they had to make difficult choices. And they furloughed 80% of their workforce, and they offered benefits and to keep paying for health insurance and all of that. But they said that they understood if they had to go get a different job, and some did, but most of their associates came back, and they rehired everyone the minute they could. And they came back because their experience of working there is so meaningful.
Yeah, it's the story you talk about them hugging you. It's how long does that hug take? Like 10 seconds?
Right, exactly.
But the lasting impact that it has, you're talking about it today. You opened up with, it's not what you do, it's how you experience. And I mean, what more experiences than getting a hug from someone? Granted,
exactly.
if you're a person who likes hugs.
Right, if you're a hugger. I'm Brazilian. I'm a hugger.
Yeah, you got a hug. Yeah. Um, so for whether it's a small organization and we're leading a team or a large organization that we have an executive leadership team, I've heard people say, I don't have time for some of this stuff, what they call soft skills, which I think these are the hard skills of life. Um, what would you offer up to these individuals that just don't have time for this?
Yeah, I mean, that is the biggest excuse that we make for ourselves. I think the way I closed my first book is with a quote that I can't remember now, but basically the idea is that we all have the same amount of time. Time is the greatest common denominator that there is, because no matter how much money we have, how young, how old, where we live, we all have 24 hours a day, right? And how we spend that time is how we spend our lives, is the impact that we make. And yes, we are all very busy. We all have competing priorities, multiple responsibilities in our lives, and and things that all, a big question is, how do we prioritize when everything is important, right? That's a question I get often. And so two things. One is I always challenge people when I hear them say I don't have time, to erase that phrase from their vocabulary. Never say that phrase. And instead say, I'm prioritizing something else right now. And does that change what you're prioritizing or how you feel about the things that you're prioritizing, right? Because that is the truth, is we all have the same amount of time, and the things that you're prioritizing over what you're not prioritizing is what you're focusing on. But then the second thing is that it doesn't really take that long. Research from Jane Dutton and others at University of Michigan shows that it takes 40 seconds to form a high quality connection with someone. 40 seconds. And you're telling me you don't have 40 seconds to check in on someone, to ask them a real question, to just say, hey, I'm so happy to see you, or to give them a little positive feedback. Hey, I heard about the meeting yesterday and how well prepared you were. That's so great. I really love how diligent you are. It takes less than 40 seconds. So I feel like people who say I don't have time are, stressed, have competing priorities, and often don't know where to start, or don't have the set of skills, and think it's going to take so much longer. And just start, give yourself 30 seconds to interact with someone.
Mm-hmm. As you're talking, it's just occurring to me that, people who have a natural disposition to care for others are going to be very good leaders in this sense, because they're actually naturally curious to how did that presentation go, or your family. In your research, did you see cultural differences in terms of people who can enact more of this this leadership that is curious about recognizing and noticing our employees? And I say this because you mentioned, as a Brazilian, you're a hugger, which,
Yeah.
the Latino has always been known as like a collective family unit.
Right, exactly. So we did our research only in North America so far. So we don't have cultural differences for like Latin America, or, like Asia would be super interesting to look at. And I think that those are next steps that we want to look at. So far we have 25 industries, about 2,000 people, but only North America represented in the data. But what I would say is, even if you're not the most, if you are not super high in relational curiosity, right? And maybe you are much more driven, you're more analytical, and you care more about the data and the work, and you have much higher technical skills than people skills, right? Still, relationships matter, because it's really about the people that we're doing it with. Like, unless you work alone and say you're like a single company of one, but still you have clients, you have customers, you have people you interact with. And you know, Shaun, from the science of positive psychology, the importance of relationships to our well-being. So forget about work and meaningful work and our experience of work, our well-being, our longevity. It all is highly influenced by the quality of our relationships. And I'm not saying, go get deep with people and hear all about their emotions. Like it's not about that. It's a quick check-in. Vivek Murthy, who was the Surgeon General of the United States, and is really his focus was on addressing the loneliness epidemic, right, in the United States. And he wrote a wonderful book. And one practice that he taught us that he implemented with his team was to spend the first 5 minutes of his weekly team meeting. He would dedicate the first 5 minutes to a little bit of an adult show and tell. So he would designate one person each week, and they rotated, to bring in a picture or an object or something that meant something to them and tell the story of that picture. And so maybe if it was my turn, I could bring a picture of my family on vacation in Cape Cod over the 4th of July. And I would say, oh, this is my family. My kids are in college, so it's really special now when we get together. And this night we went to such and such beach and we watched the fireworks together and we had a really nice time, and their friends were there and we got to meet there, and just spend 5 minutes telling the story. But then what happens is, oh, your kid's in that college. Oh, my cousin's daughter went to that college too. And now we have a connection about the college. Or in the picture were the hydrangeas. And maybe I said, oh, and these are my favorite flowers. And somebody might say, oh my goodness, I have so many hydrangeas in my garden. And do you garden too? Oh, I garden too. And all of a sudden you have a connection about gardening. So you don't even need to do all the heavy lifting if you're the leader and you're feeling stressed for time and you don't have 40 seconds to connect with each person on your team.
I like this idea of show and tell, and how simple it is. We have all like these parts of us that, like we were talking about earlier, want to be seen and valued. And what other way at work than to show a piece of our personal life that is us? And I think why I'm really enjoying this is it's really humanizing, and you're bringing a big human part to work in around meaning and meaningful work. Especially in this time when AI is just rapidly going in from the productivity standpoint. We're trying to maximize productivity. Earlier when we weren't recording, we were talking about how Dr. Michael Steger was on, and he had a fear about how much AI is removing meaning in work or meaning in life due to AI, say, replacing an editor's position, replacing a poet's position, and how much meaning in life they derive from that. I'm hearing you talk about how much satisfaction and fulfillment we derive from work through these three areas of community, contribution, and challenge. But with AI and technology trying to take some of these roles, it's scary. But something that AI cannot do in organization is bring the human element. So I just wanted to make that point, that I like how you're really strongly emphasizing that let's accentuate the human aspect of working. And as a result, productivity can go up and we develop these meaningful connections. So I appreciate it.
Exactly. And I think that's going to be even more pronounced and even more important as AI becomes more integrated into our everyday jobs, right? I mean, as a professor, I worry about the quality of the work that my students are going to be producing if they rely and outsource everything to AI. I mean, the new research from MIT showed a cognitive decline, right, on people who are using AI to write an essay versus people who didn't. And so I think we're going to learn a lot. It's very early days, and I am trying to redesign my classroom to use AI in a way that is helpful, and doesn't take away the work that the students have to do to think and learn. And I think leaders have to be thinking about that. How are we thinking about integrating AI, and how can we use it effectively, but not take away from the experience of people's contributions, right? I think there is a big crisis of meaning kind of brewing up, people losing a sense of identity of that they derive from work, about the contributions that they make that they're proud of, if those can be outsourced to AI, if jobs can be outsourced to AI, what is our role? What do
Mm.
we do? And I think one thing we can do is prioritize those human elements, is, give people a sense of community, notice them, give people a sense of contribution, notice their impact, highlight that, and then give people a sense of challenge, like notice their potential, give them opportunities to learn and grow.
Something that I think we're hovering in and around that I've heard you talk about is cultivating this psychological safety.
Hmm.
Is that when I feel this at work, I can be challenged and I could probably, you mentioned earlier, reach higher potentials than if I didn't feel safe. Can you speak to the importance of psychological safety in around these conversations of the three C's?
Yeah. I mean, we heard people talk about, like, oh, my leader, or this mentor or this coach, and they totally had my back. So when somebody has your back, right? When you feel like you can speak up and share, your real ideas, when you feel like you have the space to share parts of your identity and bring kind of parts of who you are without, if I want to talk about my kids, for example, and being a mom, without feeling like I'm going to be passed on for a promotion, for example, because I have other priorities at home and things like that. So when we feel like we can really show up authentically, share our ideas authentically, and take risks, that means that we have psychological safety, right? So psychological safety is the feeling that interpersonal risks are safe, are encouraged, and that there's just not going to be negative repercussions. We're not going to get fired, demoted, et cetera, for sharing that. I mean, and that's really important for high performance, because, so often I see and I interact with people that are very skilled and were hired for their expertise, for their skills, and then they get to the organization and they're at the meeting, but they can't share what they really think. They can't share their ideas because they have to fall into line and they have to agree with the most senior person in the room. And gosh, that is so disheartening, because you have the expertise, you have the skills, you have the contrarian point of view, or you know exactly why that's not going to work, but you don't feel safe. And so think about how much time and effort is wasted when we don't create that psychological safety for people.
Time, effort wasted, but also potential productivity, innovation,
For
creativity is just
sure.
gone.
Totally gone. Exactly. Absolutely. And that is, yeah, that is key. I mean, we put creating psychological safety in one of the community chapters called enabling authenticity, because but it could totally fit into challenge as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you're giving people kind of hard assignments, stretch assignments, and permission to fail, right? Permission to learn, but then to tell you, hey, the quicker somebody can speak up and say, hey, I tried this thing, but it didn't work, what do you suggest? The less of an issue it becomes. It's when it goes a long time and people keep
Mm-hmm.
digging deeper, right? That's when problems get bigger.
You use the word permission. I think it's such a powerful word, like permission to be yourself, permission to be creative, permission to speak up in that meeting. That's a word that always sticks to me as a leader, is like, how can I give permission to myself and others? And again, if I think about your three C's, permission definitely has a role in amongst many of them.
Yeah. And I think, as a leader, if you're thinking like, how do I give permission? The best way is to role model those behaviors. So when you're trying to create psychological safety, you have to be the one in the room saying, when you're kicking off a project, saying, I don't have all the answers here. Like, I'm not sure how this is going to work. What do you guys think? Does anybody disagree? What are my blind spots here? What am I not seeing? All right, as we keep going, please, bring to my attention something and all that. So you have to be really inviting that participation, inviting people to come to you. Another way is to role model mistakes, and to kind of not role model like on purpose, but to share the times when hey, I just want you guys to know, like, I tried this thing and it didn't go well. I failed here and this is what I did, or this is what, this person pointed it out. And I so appreciate it because I wasn't seeing it that way. And a leader that in our study that does this intentionally is Alexi Robichaud from Better Up. In senior leadership meetings, he's a CEO there, and he shares his mistakes, his failures. He like really tries to normalize it so that people feel safe speaking up when they're failing or when they're making a mistake, so that people can come in and help and fix it fast, right? And it's like fail fast. And so his example was great. So I think role modeling, sharing your own, mistakes, or what you thought something that wasn't, and all of that, and inviting participation. But what really makes or breaks a leader's effort to create psychological safety is how you respond when people do speak up, right? Let's say you're in a meeting, you say, what are my blind spots? You do all the right things. And then somebody actually is brave enough to say, well, Shaun, you didn't think about this thing. And if we do this, this other business unit is going to potentially fail because those things are interconnected, whatever. I'm just making this up. But, somebody comes and points out something that you weren't seeing. Your response here really makes or breaks your effort to create psychological safety, right? One response could be like, oh, no, I had thought of that, but like that totally is fine. It's going to be fine. Or, oh, yeah, no, I think you're wrong, right? Those responses are not good. Like everybody's watching your reaction. Nobody else is going to speak up if you respond like that. But if you take a moment, it's normal to get defensive. Of course, when people point out what you did wrong, what you didn't see, a blind spot, it's very normal to feel defensive. Take a beat and say, oh, wow, thanks for bringing that up. I hadn't thought about it that way. Can you tell me a little more? Or, I just hadn't seen it that way. I'm going to need a little bit more time to think about it, but thanks so much for bringing that up. That's all you need to say, right? And that really encourages others to speak up.
That's a great example. I mean, in alignment of that permission, that response gives you permission to continue to bring up ideas and potentially great ideas.
Right.
I want to ask you some questions here around when people are struggling to find meaning. In the book, you give a couple examples of people who are struggling to find meaning, and they found meaning within the role. But what I want to focus a bit more on, I think maybe you can relate to the other one, but was going to find a new role. And my specific question is around, I didn't read this in the book, so I'm just wondering what you found, is around money. Money, as we know, has this weirdly complex relationship with ourselves, happiness, etc. Talking about individuals who have enough money for security, they think perhaps more money might make them more happy, but they're not really experiencing that. From research, we know it really depends on how you use that money as a tool. But with change, with going to another organization, with maybe even starting your own company or your own solo entrepreneur endeavor, comes the risk of financial risk. And I see this one a lot is people working for an organization, they might realize that their values aren't in alignment with my own. There's a misalignment there. I'm not feeling like it's a good workplace, but it's providing me really good pay. I'm taking care of my family. I have this desire to go try the solo entrepreneur job, knowing that many fail, and then it provides a lot of financial stress, etc. Can we make up for the lack of meaning that we have in our, say, corporate role through other domains in our lives? Or will a continuous lack of meaning in our corporate roles, which takes up a lot of our time, kind of just take over all domains of our lives? And again, I'm talking to those people who are on the fence of, should I start something new because I want more meaning? But it also comes with other stressors.
Yeah. So what research finds is that it's very hard to have a sense of meaning in life without meaningful work, right? If you don't experience work as meaningful, It's hard, not impossible. And the I guess the counterpoint to that is that we don't advocate at all. Like my co-author Wes and I think any researcher on meaningful work would never advocate that like all your meaning needs to come from work. That is where you find meaning, right? But what I believe is that, we spend so much time at work. We spend a third of our time at work. We spend more waking hours working than doing anything else. And that's a big chunk of our lives. And so shouldn't we find some meaning there? And so, people who question like, well, I get my meaning from my community, my religious community, my family. Great. You should get meaning from your family, from your religious community, from your hobbies, from other places too. And it's also important for your well-being and for your general sense of meaning in life to get a sense of meaning from the work experience that you have, right? From the work that you do. And so that answers the question about like, where does meaning come from and where can we find meaning? We can find meaning in all domains of our life, including work. And it's really important that we find meaning at work as a contributor to our overall well-being. Now, the relationship between meaning and money is, like you said, kind of a complicated one, right? Because money does buy us happiness up to a certain point, right? But then it doesn't contribute that much more to our well-being because we kind of are creatures of a hedonic treadmill, right? So we get a short-lived spike in our happiness and our pleasure when we use money to buy something new, to buy a new car, to buy a new house, to buy a new toy, whatever it is, that we get a burst of positive experience, positive emotion, pleasure, but then we quickly adapt to that. Before we even drive off the parking lot, we've already kind of adapted and we want the next thing and the next thing, and we're always chasing those things. Whereas meaning is much deeper than that, right? Meaning is not the same as happiness. Happiness is more of like a pleasure, a joy, a burst of positive emotions. And it's very, very important for our well-being to experience that as well. Meaning is more of a deeper sense of purpose and belonging and having, a sense of importance and love in life. And there's like all these other deeper emotions that go with meaning. So, one question that I get asked a lot is, can you have too much meaning at work? And, the people who wonder about that is, there was a famous study about zookeepers. And in that study, they found that zookeepers find a big sense of meaning at work. They're often caring for animals that are going extinct, right? And they're there to take care. But because they find so much meaning at work, they're often exploited. They're paid very little. They work very long hours. And so, is there such a thing as too much meaning? And what I've come to think, like through the years of research and experience that I've had, is that no, I don't think there's such a thing as too much meaning, but there's such a thing as too little dignity from work. And so I think enough pay, having hours that are predictable and all that. I think Zainab Khan has a great book about that, The Good Job, The Case for Good Jobs, that addresses all those things, like too little dignity, too little fairness, sure. But it's not the too much meaning that causes that. Having meaning at work is a good thing. And I've been rambling, but I'm going to now get to your point about somebody who's considering leaving a high-paying job that offers security, but no meaning. Maybe they're doing something that's not aligned with their values, something that they don't believe in, to start something where there's going to be more meaning, but a lot more risk. And I think that is such an individual question. Like each person's situation is so different that it's really hard to answer that question without knowing, like, what is exactly your situation? Do you have enough of a buffer? Do you have enough money that you can live for a little while until your business takes off? Is there a way that you can kind of start both and do both for a little while to test the waters? Do you have a family depending on you and kids that you need, to provide for? And, what are the risks? I think people have to assess that for themselves, right? It's like hard for me to answer that question. One thing that I will say is for people who aren't getting like a huge sense of meaning at work, let's say, but they can't leave the job because they need the money, a couple of things. Number one, the best way to increase your sense of meaning at work is to create more meaning for others. It's kind of like the random act of kindness research or the happiness research, right? The best way to increase your own happiness is to kind of do something nice for others, express gratitude, all those things. So it's the same. So think about how can you increase somebody's sense of community, contribution, or challenge? How can you do that intentionally? And the more you do that for others, the more your own sense of meaning can increase. So you can have agency and control over that as well. Now, if you're like in a really toxic environment and you're just like, oh my God, the people I work with are terrible. I need this. I can't get another job right now. The market sucks, but I need to stay in this job. One way that people can increase meaning in life outside of work is by volunteering. Volunteering is a great way to increase sense of meaning, get a sense of community. And so that's something that people often do when they're stuck in a job that they need to be at for a little while.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate your sensitivity around, these are individual stories. These are individuals who are wrestling with these decisions. If it's okay with you, can I ask a bit about your individual story then?
Sure.
It seems to me that you had this dream. You go to New York City to work in the ad agency. I feel like I picked up on your tone when you said that was a dream. Like this is like from Brazil to, America, then finally to New York City. This is like kind of like a checklist almost, as opposed to, you didn't sound deeply like this was your calling or meaningful job. At some point, there was a shift, I would assume, because you're not in an ad agency anymore. Can you speak about wherever that inflection point or any inflection point where you left the ad agency or other changes where you didn't necessarily use money as the main driver for your decision, but rather seeking more meaning?
Yeah. Yes. So I loved that job in New York. I've worked there for a while. It was a hard, any client service job, right? It's hard. You're working nonstop. I worked crazy hours, but I had great colleagues, great relationships. I had a leader who really believed in me and gave me opportunities to really grow, expand, explore new things. So I really loved that job. Ended up moving from New York to North Carolina, got married, moved down there, found an ad agency there, and was working very different kind of environment. I worked at a boutique agency in New York, so I was handling 6 clients by myself with like one intern that we shared with others. So it was like super fast paced, but super engaging. And I was learning a ton. In North Carolina, the agency I worked for had a more traditional, like big agency model where it was an account team for one account. So it was 3 of us for one account. So I was so bored. And I kept asking for more. And I was like, I have more capacity. Can you give me more work? And I ended up getting a couple of accounts smaller accounts to run on my own. And things were going really well. And my husband and I decided to start a family. So I got pregnant. I worked all through my pregnancy. And, I really loved the industry, advertising. I loved it. And I really wanted to stay and grow in my career there. And we had found a daycare for our baby and all that. And I had the baby at the end of September. She was born September 30th. And we were doing yearly reviews in October. And so I was asked to come in for my review. It was like 2 weeks after our baby was born, and my husband stayed home with her. And I went in for what I expected to be a promotion, because I had been told before I announced my pregnancy at the beginning of the year that I was getting promoted from a supervisor to director level at the end of the year. If I did X, Y, and Z, I did X, Y, and Z plus A, B, C, D. Like I totally performed, overperformed on my goals. I went in expecting to get the promotion. And instead, I was told that my personal obligations kind of no longer fit with the responsibilities of a director, that I had like competing priorities in my life. So the timing was no longer right to promote me.
Jeez.
Yeah. And so that was the day that I decided to leave the industry. I finished my maternity leave and I left the industry. And right away, I started consulting for my old agency in New York. I was doing strategy work, some client research for them. And from there, 20 years now, 20 years later, I've kind of launched my own consulting business and wrote 2 books and all that. So in hindsight, it's all good. It worked for the best. It was the best, but it was hard.
I can imagine along the way, there's some difficult, scary decisions you had to make.
Yeah, exactly. Difficult, scary decisions. Launching a business, any entrepreneur knows it's hard, and growing a business and a family at the same time. I had her and then I had 2 more. So we had 3 kids in under 4 years, and all while running a business, a startup, right? It was really hard. Like a lot of that is a blur. And my first book, I was writing, gosh, the kids were like 5, 4, and 2. I was writing that book.
Wow.
I know it's crazy, but it's also amazing how much meaning can motivate and fuel, your pursuits.
So at what point did you find or discover or become attracted to meaningful work in terms of, hey, this is what my business is going to be centered around?
Yeah, so I originally started really focusing on productivity, personal productivity systems and models. When I was working at the ad agency in New York, I was so productive and and I thought like, oh, that's how everybody operates. And I quickly learned that it wasn't. And I was like, okay, what is it? What were the conditions that we had in place, and what are my own personal strengths that I brought to that role and to my roles that allow me to be so productive? And I started deconstructing it and learning about the different productivity models. And there was no model out there that was really fitting with what my clients needed. And so I developed my own model called the Peak Productivity Pyramid, which is based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's kind of like a hierarchical approach to productivity. And I started teaching that to clients and implementing that in organizations. And then people, were like asking me to speak about it and train them. And that's kind of how the first book was born. And really the first 13 to 15 years of my business were doing that work of productivity consulting and helping people set up systems, manage their time, prioritize effectively, align their goals with their values and their activities with their goals, and all those things that you think of when you think of productivity. But what I was finding is that when people, committed to it and created better systems, better habits, and became more productive, what happens is they find they have more time, right? You're not wasting time on things that are unimportant, or repeating things, or finding things because you lost, because you're kind of organized, you have systems in place. People had a lot more time, and with time and space came clarity. And with clarity came, how do I want to spend my time, right? Because productivity for its own sake is not enough. It's productivity for what? Why do you want to be more productive? And it was really the top level of my pyramid is a level I called possibility, or call possibility. And productivity really enabled people to spend more time at that very top of the pyramid, creating possibilities for their work, for their life. And what I was finding is that that really meant that they were spending time doing things that were really meaningful. And when that happened, when they were spending more and more time doing meaningful work, they are becoming more and more productive. And I saw that like virtuous cycle was in place. And so I decided to go back to school to learn the science behind that cycle and to understand how leaders can unlock that at scale, because I was noticing that that was so good for people's productivity, accomplishment, but for their own well-being. And gosh, what a great lever we have in our workplaces to help improve people's well-being at scale while helping them be more productive and organizations more successful. So that's kind of how I redirected my work. My work kind of evolved to go beyond productivity, right? To really meaningful work, which is the upstream factor that unlocks productivity.
Very, very interesting. I'm bringing back this permission is like, it seems as I'm hearing your story, you had permission to whatever's going to come is going to come. And from this productivity work comes this, I really like this idea of possibility, comes into meaning. Really interesting story. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks.
I see your time here, and you brought up upstream, and I had an asterisk by that because you talk a lot about that in your book, but we'll have to park that for next time.
Okay.
My curiosity is just percolating now. I think before we talked, my background is in financial psychology and how we relate to money and meaning. I'm curious, how has your relationship, not what you do with money, just your relationship, how you exist? Earlier, you talked about it, meaning's not what you do, it's how you experience. So how has your experience or your relationship with money changed, if anything at all, since you've really dove quite deep as one of the premier thinkers on meaningful work?
It's interesting. I just went for a walk with my daughter this morning, and I was just telling her, like, whenever you want to buy me any gifts, I don't want things. Like, I just want experience. I want time with you guys. I want to spend time with you doing something fun, whatever that is. And I think that is a concise way to answer that question. Is my relationship with money evolved to where, of course, it's really important, right, to have the things you need and like have money to live and to experience the things that you want to experience and all of that, of course. And I think once you've reached that level, for me, I've become much more intentional about not wanting to spend money on things or get a new car or whatever. For me, cars and things like that are utilitarian items. Like, I get something that get me from place to place. I don't care about brand. I don't care about luxury and things like that. But I really want where I'd like to spend money is on travel, big experiences, adventures with my kids, things that we're going to create memories that we can hold on to and go back and look at pictures and savor those experiences. That's how it's evolved for me.
I had a conversation with, his name is slipping me. He studies enduring levels of satisfaction on how we spend our money from Texas University. And overwhelmingly, it was spending money on experiences versus material. And he talked about these three pillars of, you get to anticipate it. So if you're going on a trip, you got to think about it, plan ahead. Interesting though, he said, have you ever surprised someone with a trip? He's like, don't do that. He's like,
Right.
you're robbing them of the anticipation of it. And he's like,
Anticipatory savoring. Is it
yeah,
Fred Bryant by any chance?
no, it's
No.
Amit Kumar,
Oh,
Dr. Amit
okay.
Kumar. Yeah. And then he talks about the experiential part and the recall. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that
This is
research is
like the
fascinating.
science of savoring overlays so much with this. Like savoring, in positive psychology, as you know, is about strengthening and lengthening positive emotions. And it's exactly, there's like three main temporal ways that we experience savoring is anticipatory savoring, the experience in the moment, being present, but then the recall, the remembering it and reliving it again. And you're right. I mean, I love that there's financial research that overlays with that because I think any listener can kind of put themselves in that trip that they were anticipating. And I am much more of an anticipatory than an in the moment savorer, I will say. Like sometimes in the moment, things are falling apart. People are yelling at each other, get the
Yeah.
picture. But then I loved also going back and looking at the picture and being like, oh, that was such a fun night. That was a great meal.
Yeah.
Sometimes the moment itself is not as enjoyable as the anticipation.
I'm recalling my experience going to Disneyland last year with my two kids who are 6 and 8, and there were hectic moments, but the recall has eliminated some
Right?
of
It
that.
takes
Revisionist
away all
history
that.
is a
It's
great tool.
amazing. Yeah.
Um, on that anticipatory part, we actually wrote letters from Mickey and Minnie Mouse to our kids, and I really tried to lean into this anticipatory experiential experience, and it was fantastic. They wanted to write
Oh,
letters
that's
back. They drew
awesome.
pictures back, and
That's amazing. What a
when they're
magical
older,
place, right?
yeah, I
I
did
loved
struggle
it.
with when they're older. They're gonna have to come to reconcile that I lied to them, and Mickey and Minnie were not sending them letters, but
They're
we'll deal
not,
with that
because
later.
see, it didn't lie. It just created magic
Yeah.
for them, you know? It was just about creating magic.
Well, this has been a very insightful conversation. I have two quick questions. One is I've asked everyone on the podcast, so we'll end with that. And it's right in alignment with your work. But the first one, I want to go back to this younger version of yourself flying into the United States with all these hopes and dreams of eventually getting to New York City. I believe you said first was St. Louis. What would that version, that chapter of you think about if they got to see what you've accomplished today? 3 kids, 2 books, focusing on deeply meaningful work that, as you said, really helps increase our well-being when we help others. So you're really doing good work. What would that younger version of you say?
Thank you. You know, I think that younger version would be really proud of my kids. I always wanted to be a mom. I think I was like born to be a mom, and everything else I do is great, but my kids are amazing. And so I think, that 14-year-old version of me would be pretty proud of my 3 kids and pretty surprised that I've become an author and written 2 books. That wasn't really part of the plan. So I think a little surprised.
Yeah. Well, you definitely have had a large impact.
Thank you.
So my final question is, we just looked in the past to think about what you would think today, but let's fast forward to end of life. It doesn't matter how old you are. You are at end of life and you're sitting on a front porch looking out at a view that gives you complete peace, ease, and contentment. You decide to write one last note, letter, or message to your children's children on what you learned was a key to living a meaningful life. What would be a theme to that message?
Love.
Love.
Just love. Yeah, really. I mean, Chris Peterson defined the whole field of positive psychology in 3 words when he said, other people matter. And I think that is key for work, for meaningful life, for experiencing well-being, happiness. Everything we want for the people we love is about other people matter. Like, love each other, just love and kindness. Yeah.
Tamara, thank you so much. I feel that love coming through this conversation as you radiate it towards all our audience listeners, and how much you deeply care about others and hearing the work that you want to share. So thank you. In terms of people finding you online, I mean, we all know how to do this. We put someone's name in the internet, but where would you point people towards to find more information about you, get your books, etc.?
So I am really active on LinkedIn and Instagram. It's just Tamara Myles, MYLES. And I love interacting with people there. I'm sharing my latest thinking, my latest research, some personal videos, all that stuff. And then my website, tamaramyles.com, is a great place to find more information about the book and just about me and the work that I do.
We will include all that in the show notes. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.
Thanks for watching this week's episode. If you enjoyed the chat, please like the video and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time.